I'll make him sorry. WWE in turmoil, Drew McIntyre's vicious beatdown leaves Jacob Fatu in critical condition. You think you know Drew McIntyre? You think the Scottish Warrior has shown us his darkest side? Think again. Because what happened this week on WWE programming has left the entire wrestling world in absolute shock, and I'm not talking about your typical "oh that was brutal" moment. I'm talking about a level of violence, a level of pure, unfiltered rage that has sent Jacob Fatu to the hospital, put WWE management in crisis mode, and turned Drew McIntyre into the most dangerous man in professional wrestling today. And here's what's going to make your blood boil: WWE might be protecting the wrong guy. Let me ask you something right now, and I want you to comment below because this is crucial. When does a wrestler cross the line from being intense to being straight up dangerous? When does creative freedom become criminal assault? Because after what Drew did to Jacob Fatu, we need to have this conversation, and we need to have it now. The footage is almost too disturbing to watch. Drew McIntyre, a man who has already proven he's willing to do anything to get back to the top of WWE, took things to a level that even the most hardcore fans are calling inexcusable. We're talking about a systematic, calculated destruction of Jacob Fatu that went far beyond what any match or storyline required. This wasn't wrestling. This wasn't sports entertainment. This was personal, this was vengeful, and according to multiple sources, this was premeditated. Here's what we know happened, and trust me, the details are absolutely chilling. After a segment that was supposed to be a standard confrontation between Drew McIntyre and the Bloodline, things escalated faster than anyone could have anticipated. Jacob Fatu, who has been absolutely dominant since joining WWE, made what some are calling a career-ending mistake. He got between Drew McIntyre and his obsession with destroying Roman Reigns' legacy. And Drew made him pay a price that nobody, and I mean nobody, saw coming. The attack started backstage. Multiple WWE employees have reported that Drew ambushed Jacob Fatu in the parking lot area, and we're not talking about a quick beatdown for the cameras. Sources inside WWE are saying this went on for nearly 10 minutes before officials could pull Drew off. 10 minutes. Do you understand what that means? In wrestling terms, that's an eternity of punishment. We're talking about chair shots, steel steps, concrete walls. Drew used everything he could get his hands on to inflict maximum damage. But here's where it gets even more disturbing, and this is what has WWE management absolutely terrified about the potential fallout. Drew didn't just attack Jacob Fatu randomly. According to people close to the situation, Drew had been planning this for weeks. He knew Jacob's schedule, he knew when he'd be alone, and he knew exactly how to maximize the damage while minimizing the chance of intervention. This wasn't a crime of passion, this was calculated, cold-blooded revenge. Now, let me throw this question at you, and I really want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Is Drew McIntyre justified in his actions? Before you immediately say no, think about this. Drew has been screwed over by the Bloodline multiple times, he's been overlooked for opportunities, he's watched as Roman Reigns and his family have dominated WWE for years while he's been fighting for scraps. Does that justify what he did to Jacob Fatu? Comment below right now with justified if you think Drew had it coming to him, or too far if you think Drew crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. The immediate aftermath of the attack is where things get really complicated, and this is why WWE is in absolute turmoil right now. Jacob Fatu was rushed to a local medical facility, and the initial reports are absolutely terrifying. We're hearing about potential concussion issues, possible fractured ribs, severe contusions, and most concerning of all, possible internal injuries that could require surgery. This isn't a "he'll be back next week with a bandaged" situation. This is a "we don't know if his career can recover from this" situation. And here's what's making fans absolutely furious with WWE management right now: they apparently saw this coming. Multiple reports from wrestlers and backstage personnel indicate that Drew had been getting increasingly erratic and aggressive in the weeks leading up to this attack. There were warning signs everywhere. Drew had been cutting promos that were becoming more unhinged, his in-ring work was getting stiffer and more dangerous, and according to some sources, he had even made threats against Bloodline members that WWE officials chose to ignore because it made for good television. Let me ask you this, and be honest in the comments: should WWE management be held responsible for what happened to Jacob Fatu? They create these storylines, they encourage these intense rivalries, they push wrestlers to tap into their darkest emotions for entertainment value, and then when someone like Drew actually acts on those emotions, they want to wash their hands of responsibility. That's absolutely insane to me. Comment below and let me know if you think WWE created this monster, or if Drew is solely responsible for his own actions. The response from the Bloodline has been swift and absolutely nuclear. Solo Sikoa, who has been leading the new Bloodline in Roman Reigns' absence, has promised that Drew McIntyre will pay in blood for what he did to Jacob Fatu. Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa have been making social media posts that are barely contain threats of violence. And the rumor mill is exploding with reports that Roman Reigns himself, who has been on hiatus, is considering coming back early specifically to deal with Drew McIntyre personally. But here's what's really interesting, and this is where the story takes a turn that nobody saw coming. There's a growing faction of WWE fans, wrestlers, and even some people within management who are actually supporting Drew McIntyre's actions. I know that sounds crazy after everything I just told you, but hear me out. There's a sentiment building that the bloodline has been running roughshod over WWE for so long, using numbers advantages and underhanded tactics to maintain their dominance, that someone needed to stand up to them with equal or greater force. Think about it from this perspective, and I want you to really consider this before you comment. How many times have we seen the bloodline attack people backstage? How many times have they used weapons? How many careers have they shortened or ended with their aggressive tactics? Jimmy USO, GUSO, Roman Reigns, Solo Sikoa, they've all participated in brutal attacks that were celebrated by fans as badass or dominant. But when Drew McIntyre does the exact same thing to a bloodline member, suddenly it's going too far. Is that fair? Is that consistent? Comment below with your thoughts, because this is a major point of contention in the wrestling community right now. The medical updates on Jacob Fatu have been coming in slowly, and each one seems to paint a grimmer picture than the last. As of the latest reports, Jacob is in stable condition, but he's still under observation for potential complications. WWE's medical team has been working around the clock to assess the full extent of his injuries, and there are whispers that independent medical consultants have been brought in because the injuries are so severe and complex. Here's a detail that's absolutely heartbreaking and is making this whole situation even more emotional. Jacob Fatu's family has been at the hospital constantly, and according to sources close to the family, they're absolutely devastated not just by the physical injuries, but by the betrayal they feel from WWE. The Fatu family has given everything to professional wrestling for generations. We're talking about the Anoa'i family dynasty, one of the most respected and important families in wrestling history. And now, one of their own is in the hospital because WWE allegedly failed to protect him from a clearly unstable coworker. This brings up another question that I think is absolutely critical to this discussion, and I want your honest opinion in the comments. Should wrestlers be responsible for their own safety, or should WWE have protocols in place to prevent this type of thing from happening? In a real sport, if one athlete deliberately injured another outside of competition, there would be suspensions, fines, maybe even criminal charges. But in WWE, the line between storyline and real life is so blurred that nobody seems to know what the appropriate response should be. Tell me what you think. Should this be handled internally by WWE, or should law enforcement be involved? Drew McIntyre's response to the backlash has been chilling. Instead of showing remorse or apologizing, Drew has doubled down on his actions in a way that's making him either the biggest heel in WWE or a genuine danger to the roster, depending on who you ask. In a statement released through his social media, Drew said, and I quote, "I told everyone I would make them sorry. I told everyone I would do whatever it takes." Jacob Fatu was just the first example. If the bloodline thinks this is over, they haven't seen anything yet. I'm just getting started. Just getting started. This man put someone in the hospital, potentially ended a career, and he's saying he's just getting started. How is WWE supposed to handle this? How do you book someone who is essentially promising more real-life violence against your roster? And here's the scariest part. Drew is one of the most talented wrestlers in the world. He's a former WWE champion, he's a massive draw, and he's still got years of prime wrestling left in him. WWE can't just fire him or suspend him indefinitely without taking a massive financial hit. Let me throw this scenario at you, and I want you to game this out in the comments. If you were Triple H or Nick Khan right now, what would you do with Drew McIntyre? Do you suspend him and hope this blows over? Do you lean into it and make this the hottest storyline in wrestling? Do you fire him and risk him going to AEW and talking about how WWE is soft and can't handle real intensity? This is a nightmare scenario for WWE management, and there's no clear right answer. Comment below with what you would do if you were running WWE right now. The locker room reaction has been absolutely split down the middle, and this is creating a division within WWE that could have long-term consequences for the entire company. On one side, you have wrestlers who are absolutely horrified by what Drew did and are demanding that WWE take serious disciplinary action. These are the people saying that what Drew did was unprofessional, dangerous, and sets a terrible precedent for how conflicts should be resolved backstage. On the other side, and this is the part that's really controversial, you have wrestlers who are quietly supporting Drew, or at least understanding his frustration. These are the people who have felt overlooked, overshadowed, or disrespected by the bloodline's dominance over the past few years. They're not necessarily saying Drew was right to do what he did, but they're saying they understand why he snapped. And that understanding is creating a powder keg situation backstage where it feels like more violence could erupt at any moment. Here's a specific detail that leaked from backstage sources that absolutely blew my mind. Apparently, when Drew was finally pulled off of Jacob Fatu, it took 6 people to restrain him. We're talking about security, road agents, and fellow wrestlers all working together to stop Drew's assault. And even then, Drew was reportedly still trying to get back to Jacob, still screaming threats, still completely consumed by rage. This isn't normal behavior, even for a heated rivalry in wrestling. This is something else entirely. The legal implications of this situation are massive and could set precedents that affect wrestling for years to come. Multiple legal experts who specialize in sports and entertainment law have weighed in on this situation, and their opinions are all over the map. Some are saying that WWE's contracts likely protect them and the wrestlers from legal action in situations like this because everyone involved signs waivers acknowledging the physical nature of the business. Others are saying that what Drew did clearly went beyond the scope of anyone's employment and could constitute assault and battery. And here's where it gets really complicated from a legal standpoint. If this had happened during a match or even during a backstage segment that was being filmed for television, there would be some argument that this was part of the show and therefore protected. But this happened in a parking lot, away from cameras, with no scripted purpose. That makes it much harder for WWE to argue this was sports entertainment and much easier for someone to argue this was just one employee attacking another. Question for the comments, and this is a genuinely difficult one: if Jacob Fatu decides to press criminal charges against Drew McIntyre, would you support that decision? On one hand, he was brutally attacked and has every right to seek justice. On the other hand, pressing charges could damage WWE's reputation, hurt the business as a whole, and set a precedent where every stiff shot or backstage confrontation becomes a legal matter. What do you think? Should Jacob press charges, or should this stay in-house? Let me know in the comments. The fan reaction to all of this has been insane and has really highlighted how divided the wrestling community is on so many issues. Social media has been absolutely exploding with debates, arguments, and hot takes about Drew McIntyre, Jacob Fatu, the Bloodline, and WWE's handling of the whole situation. You've got people creating petitions to have Drew fired, you've got people creating counter-petitions to have Drew pushed as WWE champion, and you've got people who are just confused about how to feel about any of this. What's really fascinating from a fan psychology perspective is how different people are processing this based on their favorite wrestlers and their previous opinions about the Bloodline. If you're a huge Bloodline fan, you're absolutely furious with Drew and probably want him thrown in prison. If you're someone who's been tired of the Bloodline's dominance, you might be secretly happy that someone finally stood up to them in a way they couldn't just bounce back from immediately. And if you're somewhere in the middle, you're probably just confused and upset that your wrestling entertainment has turned into something that feels genuinely dangerous and uncomfortable. Here's a question that gets to the heart of what wrestling should be, and I really want a thoughtful response in the comments. Where is the line between entertaining violence and disturbing violence in professional wrestling? We watch people get hit with chairs, thrown through tables, and beaten with steel steps every week, and we cheer for it. But when those same actions happen in an unscripted context, suddenly we're horrified. Is that hypocritical? Are we consuming violence as entertainment and then acting shocked when that violence has real consequences? Think about it and let me know your perspective. The business implications of this incident are potentially huge for WWE, and this is something that isn't getting talked about enough in the mainstream wrestling coverage. WWE is a publicly traded company now, which means they answer to shareholders who care about things like brand reputation, talent safety, and legal liability. An incident like this, where one of their top stars potentially ended another star's career in an unprovoked attack, could lead to serious questions from investors about WWE's talent management and safety protocols. There are also sponsorship concerns that WWE has to be thinking about. Major corporate sponsors don't want to be associated with a company where employees are putting each other in the hospital outside of the controlled environment of a wrestling match. If this story gets picked up by mainstream media in a big way, you could see sponsors putting pressure on WWE to take serious action against Drew McIntyre, regardless of whether that's what's best for the wrestling product. And let's talk about the elephant in the room. How does this affect WWE's television product going forward? The show must go on, right? But how do you continue storylines involving Drew McIntyre and the Bloodline when one of their key members is in the hospital? Do you write Jacob Fatu off television for months while he recovers? Do you bring in his family members for revenge angles? Do you pivot the entire storyline in a different direction? Every decision WWE makes here has massive ripple effects. Here's something I want you to consider, and comment below with your prediction. Will Jacob Fatu's injury be written into storyline, or will WWE try to pretend this never happened and quietly remove him from television? My gut says they have to address it because the wrestling media has already covered this extensively, but WWE has a history of just ignoring inconvenient real-life situations and hoping fans forget about them. What do you think WWE will do? The historical context of this situation is really important to understand the magnitude of what's happening. Wrestling has a long, complicated history with real-life violence between wrestlers, both in and out of the ring. We've had legitimate backstage fights between legends, we've had situations where real heat between wrestlers led to stiff matches, and we've had incidents where the line between work and shoot got so blurred that people got seriously hurt. But in the modern era, with WWE being a more corporate, controlled environment, incidents like this are supposed to be impossible. That's what makes this so shocking to longtime wrestling fans. WWE has spent years trying to distance itself from the Wild West days of wrestling where anything could happen backstage. They've implemented wellness policies, conduct policies, and all sorts of rules and regulations designed to protect talent and maintain professionalism. For something like this to still happen in 2025, in the Triple H era of WWE, is absolutely stunning and suggests that maybe WWE's systems aren't as robust as they claim. Let me ask you something that might be uncomfortable to think about: how many other wrestlers are one bad day away from doing something similar to what Drew did? Wrestling is an incredibly stressful, physically demanding job where people are dealing with injuries, pain medication, ego, ambition, and real-life personal issues, all while trying to maintain a public persona. The mental health challenges of being a professional wrestler are enormous, and WWE doesn't exactly have a great track record of providing mental health support to their roster. Comment below if you think WWE needs to do more to support wrestlers' mental health, or if you think personal responsibility should be the priority. Speaking of mental health, there are growing concerns about Drew McIntyre's psychological state that go beyond just this one incident. People who have been watching Drew closely over the past year have noticed changes in his behavior, his promos, and his interactions with fellow wrestlers. Some are speculating that Drew might be dealing with depression, anxiety, or other mental health issues that are manifesting as anger and violence. If that's the case, then this situation becomes even more tragic because it means Drew needs help, not punishment. But here's the counterargument that you'll see all over social media: plenty of wrestlers deal with mental health issues without putting their coworkers in the hospital. If we excuse every act of violence by attributing it to mental health struggles, then we're essentially saying wrestlers can do whatever they want without consequences as long as they claim they were struggling. That's not fair to the victims, and it's not fair to the people who do struggle with mental health issues but manage to control their actions and treat people with respect. This is genuinely one of the most complex situations in recent wrestling history, and I don't think there are any easy answers. What I do know is that this conversation needs to happen, and it needs to happen now, before someone else gets hurt or before WWE finds itself in an even worse legal and public relations nightmare. So here's what I want from you, the wrestling newsletter community. I want your honest, thoughtful takes on this entire situation. Don't just react emotionally, really think about all the different angles we've discussed. Think about Drew's perspective, Jacob's perspective, the Bloodline's perspective, WWE management's perspective, and the fans' perspective. This is complicated, this is messy, and this is important. Comment below and let me know. 1. Is Drew McIntyre justified in his actions, or did he go too far? 2. Should WWE face consequences for allowing this situation to develop? 3. What should happen to Drew McIntyre going forward? 4. Should Jacob Fatu press criminal charges? 5. How should WWE handle this storyline-wise? And most importantly, make sure you share this video with every wrestling fan you know, because this conversation needs to happen across the entire wrestling community. We need WWE to know that fans are paying attention and that we expect better from the company in terms of protecting talent and managing these situations responsibly. The wrestling world is watching. WWE's next move will define how seriously they take talent safety and how they balance entertainment with responsibility. This is a defining moment for the company, for Drew McIntyre's career, for Jacob Fatu's future, and for wrestling as a whole. Stay tuned to Wrestling Newsletter for all the latest updates on this developing story, because trust me, this is far from over. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any updates as this situation continues to unfold. This is the biggest story in wrestling right now, and we're going to be covering every single development. The question isn't whether WWE will survive this controversy, they will. The question is whether they'll learn from it and make changes to ensure it never happens again. Or will this just be another headline that fades away while the same dangerous patterns continue backstage? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain: wrestling will never be quite the same after what Drew McIntyre did to Jacob Fatu.